Hi there, this is Ray with Easy Simple Mechanic. Welcome back to the channel. For those of you that come and watch the videos, please do me just one favor and either subscribe or hit that likes button so that we can continue working on some of this stuff. Well, last time we were working on this Miller Bobcat 225G, and we found some issues with the alternator and some also dirty pickup and stuff. So we needed to order some parts. We got those in. So today we're gonna continue working on this Miller Bobcat 225G and see if we can't get it to run, and then we'll go from there. So let's get with the program. If you recall, last time we found this burnt alternator, and we went ahead and bought the alternator. We also bought the voltage regulator for it. We might as well. And we went ahead and I took, and you know how we were getting intermittent spark on it as well. I went ahead and cleaned up in here, in between the pickup and the magnet that's kind of pressed onto this shaft. So I did that by just using some carb cleaner and made sure that I ran some stuff in there. You can take the bolts loose, which I did, and clean all that up real well. But there's a way, if you guys needed to know if the pickup was good, all you have to do is put the ground. You can put a ground, a 12-volt ground, to the case on the pickup down here. With it off, you can check it. Put a ground here, off the battery ground, and then put a 12-volt source to the red wire here. And you should check the voltage from the black wire with your positive lead from your voltmeter on this black wire and your negative to the ground. And you should see 12 volts there. If you don't see 12 volts, then that means the pickup is open. Now, once you get it installed, what you should be able to do is hook up all your source and everything to it, just like you would, like if you had it hooked up to the engine. Hook it up to the coil. Make sure your condenser is on there. On the positive side, it needs to be on the red wire. The condenser does. Make sure you put it on there. And then with the key on, or if you apply some positive voltage to the red wire here, and you rotate this shaft, it should fluctuate. It should go, the lowest it should go is probably 1 volt, or somewhere around there is where it winds up going. And it could go all the way up to 12 or some voltage in between. But I think even less than a volt can be seen there. The pickup is just interrupting the circuit. So you still should have your 12 volts to the coil. Anyway, that's how you check these. So basically, if it drops down to 1 volt for half of the cycle as you rotate the shaft, then I think you're doing good, because it's interrupting the circuit. Anyways, that's how you check those. So now we're just going to continue on with putting this back together and see if we can't get this running. So we'll put those parts on here and move on. Oh, by the way, while I'm at it, if you pull this cover off like we did last time, you will see here, this is a oil pressure sending unit, and it is wired into the circuit as well. So if you have no oil pressure, for example, if on your coil you're not getting, when you turn the key on or crank it, and you're not getting any voltage to the coil, it could be that you're not getting oil pressure, and therefore it's cutting the power off. So you need to check this or bypass it. In other words, disconnect this guy from the coil, because it runs up here. It connects to the positive of the coil as well. So if there's no oil pressure, it won't allow you to get 12 volts to the coil. So it cuts, basically it's a shutoff switch for the coil if you lose oil pressure. So that's another thing that can happen. This case, this one seems to be okay because we had 12 volts up there on the coil. So let's get to putting this alternator back together and see if we can't get this thing running. Okay, so we got that regulator installed. Basically, you gotta take this shield loose, and it's held on with a bolt from the backside. You take out that bolt right there on the backside, and then you put the new regulator in there, and you're good to go. Now, some of these may or may not come with threads on this, so you may have to tap the threads on the regulator if you want to use the same bolt hole. Otherwise, you can use a bolt and a nut, either way, to get that on there. In this case, I just went ahead and used a tap and tapped out the hole to the size of the bolt that was the original bolt, so that it would stay in there. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and put the alternator over here. We'll put it on and continue. Okay, so we just set the new one on there, and then we just put these 3 screws in there. These are a Torx bit. And there's that. So now we just have to run these wires into this loom. So we can get all these wires back in there, into that loom. And we'll just close that loom back up. Plug in these 2 wires are the ones that go to your regulator. I'm not sure it matters which one goes where, but we'll have to check that. Okay, so I just put these wires in this loom and folded back the tie over it, and I put a couple of plastic ties on there because there were some on there before, so I just went ahead and put some on there to hold all that. And then the other wires plug in. The 2 outside wires are the ones that go to your alternator. This is the one that goes back into the harness here. So while I have this apart and I have pretty easy access to this oil filter, I'm gonna go ahead, since I ordered a new one with that filter kit, I'll go ahead and swap that oil filter out. And we'll get the flywheel on, and we'll get the cover back on. While I was at it here, another thing I did is I just took a little bit of wheel bearing grease and I lubricated the shaft on the starter. So just take some grease on your finger and work it in there a bit. Once you start exercising the starter, it'll lubricate that bushing and the starter gear. And before we put the shield on, I'm gonna hook up the coil on here, and just to be sure that I'm getting spark before I put that cover back on. One other thing is you want to make sure not to forget to put your key back in here for your flywheel. This has got a strange kind of key. It's not just the little key part here on the bottom, but it has that other piece that stretches all the way back in there. So I think what it does is it helps you align the little magnets that are in the back there. There's a little slot in the plastic where that piece that slides the magnets in there goes lined up so that they're in line with the shaft the way it needs to be. So you want to make sure you don't forget that key before you put your flywheel on. Tighten that down. I recommend before putting the flywheel back on that you clean the grooves between the magnets to make sure that you have there's clear difference in poles. So you put the magnets, make sure that you clear all that out and blow it out. Also, I took some emery paper to the surfaces where the shaft will meet the, in here, the slot, because, it's kind of rusted up a little bit, so it was really hard to get off. So I'm gonna try and I cleaned that up. I cleaned also the shaft that goes through it. I might put just a tinge of lubricant on it just to keep some of that penetrant, to keep the rust off of it. And let's just get this back on there. This is the setup I have for torquing down the flywheel bolt. It's supposed to be between 50 and 55 foot-pounds. So I have my torque wrench setting here. And then I just put a pry bar over here, and I'm jamming it up here on top just to hold the flywheel from spinning while I torque it down. And let me see if I can do this with one hand here. I don't know, I can't seem to get enough pressure on it. That was it, it clicked, so we're good. Okay, so once you get your filter on, you just want to make sure you put a film of oil on the O-ring, on the gasket, the rubber gasket, and then you tighten it up to where it just makes contact, the surface makes contact, and then you tighten it 3/4 of a turn. So in my case, the F was on top right here, the F for oil filter. And so I ran it 3/4 of a turn to right here. And that seems to be good. Unless it leaks, and then we might have to tighten a little more, but I doubt it. Okay, let's move on to putting a coil on and see if this thing will fire. We got our coil sitting here. Now remember, you just have the black wire that comes from the pickup, goes to the negative side of the coil, or the one that has the bigger lug on it. All the others go on the positive, including the condenser that sits back here. We'll plug that in. And so now we just need to provide some power and see if we're gonna get a good spark now. We left it dark here to see if we can see the spark on the spark plug. So it's just an old plug. Okay, so that's the shield. Those are where the screws go. Now we'll continue by putting on this bracket with this return spring that goes right up in here. So we'll put that one on next. Okay, so we just took the spring back in here where it was on the second slot up there. And then we just put in those 2 bolts that hold the bracket in. We'll tighten them down. Okay, There's one here in front of the intake manifold, the exhaust manifold, that I can't get with the ratchet. So I guess I'm just gonna have to do it by hand. There it is. So there's our return spring. So next, oh yeah, and we don't want to forget to put the bolts in and tighten the ones that hold down the coil. Which are right there. And there's one on this side. Okay. Now we'll hook up the fuel and see if we get this thing to fire off. Okay, what we want to do is, I'm using this little old dish soap bottle, washed it out and cleaned it out. And I am putting the fuel that has some two-stroke oil in it. Since this hasn't been run in a while, I'm gonna go ahead and use some of that just to make sure the cylinders are lubricated. So I'm just gonna pour a little bit down the throat and see if this thing will fire off. I have the choke off. So let's just put a little bit there, and then let's see if it'll go. Okay, so we know it runs. Now we need to backfire because it ran out of fuel. But let's, I didn't see anything come out of the pump here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the same thing, but this time I'm gonna put okay, so what I did for now is I rigged up a little wire. As you can see, I have it hooked up here and to the lever so I can put it into the idle position. So I just made that with a little hook on one end of the wire and another hook here. That way it'll hold that lever all the way back to the idle position while we test this out. And then the other thing I did was I just took some fuel and I hooked up the hose to the carburetor. We just fill it up to fill up the bowl in the carburetor. We did that because the fuel pump is not working. Instead of waiting for the fuel pump to get here, or this idle solenoid if he's gonna want one, he may just wanna use it this way, and then just, once he gets it started and warmed up, he can just disconnect that little cable there and he can go on to welding. But we'll see. He'll tell me what he wants to do. But I think let's just try and see if we can get this thing running. So check and see if the charging system is working. I went ahead and installed this solenoid, the idle solenoid. I tested it by just hot wiring it to the battery terminals, and it is not working to pull the idle back in. So that's not working. Also, I checked to see if there's any fuel in the tank, and I did that by just blowing in the fuel hose. So if we just blow on that, you can hear the bubbling that goes on in there. There's quite a bit of fuel in there, and since this is old fuel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and siphon that out of there, and then I'm going to go to the store and pick up some new fuel line, because this is all kind of old. So I'm going to replace the fuel line, make sure I got a good seal on all that stuff. Plus this, it looks like they did a little work on this fuel line here to it might have come apart in there in the past, so they just put a copper line in there, but they didn't seal that up very good. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and pull that fuel out of there, and then we'll put some good fuel in it. We'll replace the fuel lines, and we'll try and seal that fuel tank up a little better. Also, while I'm at the store, I'm gonna pick up some oil so that we can go ahead and change the oil in the engine while we're at it, since we got a new filter on it. Okay, we have our voltmeter hooked up. So it's at 12.3 volts. That's coming right off the battery. And so now let's see if we can start this thing up and see if we get some charging. Well, as you can see, it maintained the voltage at, 12.3 volts or whatever. It went down initially, but it started coming back up. So therefore, the charging system is keeping up with it. And that's at idle. Once, we get that thing on high speed, we'll be able to see if it charges a little more, but it's maintaining the voltage on it, which is good. Yeah, I guess that's gonna do it for this episode. I guess next time we'll replace the fuel pump and get the fuel system fixed completely, sealed up over on the tank, and get new hoses on it and everything. And then we'll also check and see if it welds. But didn't want to keep this video too long. Well, folks, that's gonna do it for this episode. Please like, share, subscribe, and we'll check you guys out on the next one. Thanks for watching.